So we'll begin with taking attendance. Stephanie, can you get us started?
Yep, Becky Beisel will be here shortly. Brian Davis.
Here.
Scott Gergen.
Here.
Lisa Hadeen.
Here.
Stephanie Mom here. Dave Pemble.
Here.
Kelsey Waits.
Here. All right, thank you, Stephanie. So next up is a motion to approve the agenda.
So move. Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up is approval of the minutes from the May 26th board meeting.
So move.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the May meeting say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So now who is the Sunny Acre
Oh.
Zoom? Oh, Cam. There we go, right on cue. Thank you,
Calling
Cam.
from home.
All right, so recognition of visitors. Thank you to everyone tuning in at home and joining us for our meeting. And as always, you can go to Board Book and follow along with us or access any of our attachments there. So first up is items for discussion, beginning with policies. And first up is the first reading of policy 503.2, which is early admission to kindergarten. So do we have any questions or comments on this one? This one was kind of brought forward to us as a suggestion a while back, about a year ago. And the policy committee had discussed whether a policy was most appropriate or if just having this embedded in our procedure would be better. And with only one family who generally asks for this each year, we actually thought it would be more accessible as a policy, since it's not something that administrators would kind of be experiencing a lot. It would be easier to find through policy, and families could access it through policy easier than procedures. So this is based off of White Bear Lake's policy, and we are happy to take any questions or comments.
Is there any opportunity? I saw the costs associated with it. What about for families where the cost would be a burden?
I think we would default to how we have sliding scales for things like free and reduced lunch or things of that nature. I don't know that we would, I mean, we could probably put something in there if that would be what the board wants, but I can't imagine us not working with the family to try and get this taken care of. But it might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that we would. For a parent that would maybe look up this policy, if it's not in there, they could perhaps have some questions or just decide not to do it at all.
Right. Yeah, we can put something in there. Probably not a bad idea.
That's a great comment. Lisa?
I have a small comment. I'm very comfortable with this being a policy. And my question was around, do we need any clarity on an appeal process? Again, I appreciate it's only maybe, one or two families. We leave it at the statement in F is that the final decision is made by district personnel, which is fine. I think that's pretty open. I wonder if there shouldn't be one more statement for an appeal to superintendent or just something, or that there would not be but like final is final.
Yeah, we can do that. Maybe just change F to reflect that specificity,
right,
rather than just district personnel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is great feedback. I love taking it to the whole board for this reason, because you see things that we didn't see in our committee meetings, and I think that's wonderful. So excellent. Any other thoughts? All right. I'm not seeing any. So with that, we'll move on, and the policy committee will make those adjustments and bring it back for a second reading next month. So for a second reading this month, we have policy 406, which is public and private personnel data. Are there any questions or comments on this one?
This isn't an I wonder statement, and it's not a concern with the policy, but as we're also looking at 206, which has some private data statements in there about what can and can't be released. Of course, I say that now when I was reviewing it, I didn't write down what 206 was, so that could be super helpful there. I just wanted to be assured that our definition of private data is consistent across policies. Or does just having this policy make it the definition?
Yeah, I was just actually, it's a great comment, because I was just on with one of our attorneys yesterday talking about Title IX changes and all the stuff we have to do there. And that was the exact thing that they recommended, is decide which policy is your base policy, and then don't have all of the information in the other policies, but refer back to the base policy for that. So
Okay.
maybe it's something where that 206 is the public participation in school board meetings. So we may want to just, as we're going through this, maybe that's a note at the policy meetings, that when we look at those cross references, that if we have any policies that are in essence duplicating, that we do references, and then we're not having to worry about updating multiple policies at the same time for this, for that reason.
That would straight on address my concern. And I'm going to be comfortable moving this one forward now, knowing that we've worked towards consistency over time.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, a perfect example of what policy committee should be doing as we review our yearly process of policies, is making sure that we can make these adjustments and the connections that we need to. So.
Yeah, the worst thing that can happen is have two policies with stuff embedded in them and have them come into contradiction with each other.
Right? Always fun.
Yeah, that would be a good time. I move that we take policy 406, public and private personnel data, and we move it to an individual action item this evening.
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that motion? All right. All those in favor of moving this to an individual action item, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. So next up for a second read is policy 430, which is employee recognition compensation. So any additional feedback on this policy?
I have the same feedback that I had last time, and again, I still approve it, but I wonder if it doesn't, as we think back to our work session last week about developing a 3-year board plan, does this identification of that year's employee recognition, because I feel like it's not an 3-year operational plan thing, but it does have to be something we do every year. I don't know. I'm caught in that. I don't even think that's a question. I think that's an observation.
I don't think I'm understanding.
So when you read this policy, it says prior to the school year, with regard to fiscal standing and whatever, the board, whatever is the technical term there, the school board will identify
we
declare what the
provide
awards are going to be.
Yeah.
Right. And the recognition is going to be. And we could make a different declaration every year, right? And the policy's calling for an action state, it's an action call. So like every August prior to that school year, presuming we think the school year starts in September, not the budget year.
So the question is, what needs to go into the plan and what is just the regular board duties that don't go into the plan?
I think this fits in the 87 things, doesn't it?
I think so. And again, I think once I got done saying it, I don't think it's a question. I think it's still an observation. Like we either need to recognize it has to show up on our agendas regularly. So who's ever building the agenda, the chair and the superintendent, or because we don't have a practice of doing it right now, maybe it gets on the 3-year operating plan or board's work plan until we become more disciplined about having it. It's just a thing. It's just a thing to think about, and we don't need to take action on it today. It's just a new task for us that I don't want us to forget to do.
Yeah, and so what we're doing is working on a board calendar that has these standing items on it on that 12-month cycle. So this would fall under that agenda item. I would imagine probably in August of each year is where it'll live, so that it'll hit that agenda. And if we get better about getting into the habit of probably looking 2 months out, then that's how this will work. So ideally, we'd be looking at next month's board meeting and the following month's board meeting, because that should backtrack what are things we should have as conversations at work sessions leading up to those board meetings. I agree.
I was going to say we could modify it to say if it is not declared that it defaults to the previous year, but then we have item D that says nothing in this policy sets a precedent for the presence or absence of recognition awards on a year-to-year basis. So that would be in conflict.
I think a board calendar is a great idea. We have just to keep us all organized and have it set up. And it can even be part of like the board training handbook. Here are the standing things that we do every year and when. Any other thoughts on this policy? Okay, otherwise we can move this to an action item.
Yep. I move that policy 430 employee recognition compensation be moved to an individual from this evening.
I second.
Okay, is there any discussion on that motion? All right, all those in favor of moving this policy to an action item, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, same sign. All right, motion carries. So the next item for discussion is the move to in-person board meetings. And so we had discussed this previously, and I don't know who would want to give an update on the facilities section of that, but I guess I can since I'm already blabbing. So we had originally thought that we would have the new board meeting set up in July, but at our most recent facilities committee meeting, it was clear that this would not happen in July, and the time frame would be looking more like late August-ish. And so the question is, do we want to move to in-person board meetings still in July? Do we want to do work sessions in person and board meetings over Zoom? How do we want to work this now that kind of that schedule has been bumped?
What are the logistical concerns with having it in the boardroom? Is it a media concern or a spacing concern?
We could have it in that boardroom, but it's a space. I think there's two issues. There's a space concern. The other piece of it is that the district office there's a lot of cubicles in that area that you can't lock off. So as you open the building up for general public access, there's no way to monitor where people are going in that building. Plus, that's also an entry access point to the middle school because it's an exit from that space. So we'd have to have, my concern would be we need somebody there monitoring those doors to make sure if the general public was in that we were able to secure people's workspaces. I think technically we could do it. That wouldn't be a problem. And I think that's what you've done in the past is you've used that space. We could also, we have run the space in the media center without the new stuff. It's just a lot of equipment and a lot of person power that it takes at this point to put that together. But it can be done.
I would say we should avoid the for the reasons that Bob has outlined, I would like to avoid using the district office. I'm up for any other suggestions, but I would like to avoid using the district office for the reasons that he outlined.
I have a additional layer of concern with regard to coming back. I feel like our work sessions, or at least the strategic planning sessions, have been super valuable in person. That we don't have to accommodate streaming. We don't have to accommodate broadcasting. The boardroom has been sufficient. We tend not to have a ton of public. We tend not to have any public observation. We have very, very low attendance. I'd like to see us continue to do work sessions in person, and have that be a valuable time together. And I know Kelsey said the word August. I think that optimistic people are saying the word August. I think realistically by the September board meeting, which would be, like the third week in September, maybe the fourth, it is probably more likely. I think I would also like to see us be in a position to clearly articulate what is public comment, what is open forum, and what is listening session. And I would like all of those things resolved prior to us coming back in person. Because I think there's a little bit of lack of clarity between our policy and our practice right now. So.
Yeah, and I think that gets difficult because we passed that policy right as COVID started. So then we didn't really have an opportunity to actually start working with the public participation policy. So I do think that is a great point. Stephanie, I saw you raise your hand.
I was going to say the same thing, Kelsey, and I really appreciate Lisa's comments too. I don't want there to be any logistical concerns and constraints. And the one time that we did it in the media center, that was great, but you're absolutely right, Dr. McDowell. It was a huge push with a bunch of people to get that up and operating. I think we are very effective over Zoom for our business meetings. And if it's a temporary delay, 1 or 2 more months, I can suck it up. But eventually I would like to be in person.
All right, so then Dave?
I guess my thought is, and I know there's some constraints personally for me on this, but I think the sooner we would get back to in person, the better. I think that that's important to folks. And it works, when COVID was going full blast, yep, I wanted to be as far away from everybody as possible. And, but, I think it's time. Everybody else is going back to in person. I think we can figure out a way that we can make this work, be it in the old boardroom or someplace else, or even if we go down and make some kind of temporary arrangement at City Hall for a couple of months and, use their facility, something to put us back into an in-person atmosphere, I think would go a long ways. So that's my 2 cents worth there.
All right, so a couple of ideas have popped up. I'm hearing that we want to get in person as soon as possible. It sounds like I didn't hear anyone say no work sessions in person. So it sounds like work sessions for sure we will do in person. And then it's the business meeting. So would we like to do business meeting over Zoom? Would we like to do them in the media center and just not have it all set up? Or, Dave suggested City Hall for a couple of months, but are there any preferences of these? Stephanie?
Lisa did bring up the point with, we're not, our practice and provided that policy, like you said, Kelsey, it went into effect right as COVID was rolling in. So we didn't really get to exercise what our procedures are going to be. I would like to get that hammered out and then go in person, plus, finding that specific location. I want this to be a meeting that the public feels welcome to join and is not limited because of our issues. So that's my 2 cents on it. And I think Zoom has worked right now. And again, it would be just what, a 2-month delay. So I think that would work unless there's an alternative that would open it up to, you know, without it being a huge logistical concern and push to make sure that we can exercise our processes per our policy.
And Scott?
Yeah, I agree with Stephanie. I think we keep our business meeting over Zoom. We keep our work sessions in person. And whether we have our work sessions in the boardroom or we have our work sessions elsewhere, that's fine. I'd rather have some consistency in where we're going to be rather than hopping around. I think that it'd be easier for us so we remember where the meetings are, and I think it would be easier for the community, for those people that would wish to attend.
And Brian, do you have any thoughts? Otherwise, it sounds like business meetings on Zoom, work sessions in person.
Nope, I think that's perfect the way Scott just laid it out. I like it.
All right. Then that sounds good, and we'll plan on moving forward that way until the boardroom, I don't know, not quite renovations, but until the boardroom is finished and we can get that set up for the public. And then we will work on our public engagement policy and getting that process all ironed out in the meantime. All right, open forum.
I may have mislabeled this one. I probably should have labeled it public comment, not open forum. Just have it. District. But this is what I'd sent an email about to everybody about deciding where do we want that public comment to live, inside of or outside of the official board meeting. Many districts are shifting to an out of, if they already aren't there, out of the board meeting.
Dave?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Lisa, didn't we say that we were going to do or look at, or we have in the past done the 10 or 15 minutes before the board meeting, and at least 2 members of the board were present as a listening session, right?
Yeah, and that's our current policy.
Right.
And that, I mean, that now that I am reminded of it, that's why I was reading about private data, because that comes up in there. But that policy says, if I remember, and Stephanie, I'm sure remembers this better than I do, that it can be listening with regard to items on the agenda or not on the agenda. And it is prior to the meeting. Right now, we, obviously we haven't had the practice since that came in. Previously, it was you had to request it in advance,
Right?
So we knew when board members needed to be there early. Right now, you kind of don't have to request it in advance, is my understanding, and we just have to be in the habit of having somebody available.
I remember that discussion we were talking about, because some of the surrounding districts said that you had to sign up, and then you took the person or the group that started, like if they signed first, and you had to talk about what the topic was. But do we do this beforehand, or do we do this as part of the meeting schedule, I guess is my question.
Right. So another option is we all still come at 6 o'clock, but from 6 to 6:15 is a public forum, an open forum, however we want to term it, that is not part of the business meeting itself. And so that's an opportunity for community members to speak and share their concerns with us. It's not a back and forth. It's, just a chance for them to speak. And then at 6:15 is when the board meeting officially starts, and when, we start recording and streaming and things like that.
Yeah, and I feel super comfortable at whether it starts at 5:45 or 6 o'clock. I think is of little consequence to me, but I say that now, I don't know. But I'd like us to use the terminology that's currently in our policy, which is listening session, because I think that is really clear about what it is, right? And that's what it is. It's a listening
Yeah.
session. Where I'm a little less clear, and honestly, this happens very infrequently. I can only remember it happening once in the last couple of years, is when a member of the public requests to speak to an agenda item during the board meeting. And I skimmed the policies, and it didn't like jump out at me exactly what our practice is with that.
So
So it's,
that's where I kind of got confused with that, because there's a policy 206 and a policy 206A, which what I'm wondering happened as you were going into COVID and needed to arrange something for Zoom meetings. What it reads on the website anyway is that the public can still speak to the board. And I'm wondering if what happened is there was somewhere along the line of discussion of here's how we're going to do this now that we're going to be Zooming meetings.
I think it was maybe not about Zooming meetings, but it was about moving away. We had a practice where you had to demonstrate, a member of the public had to demonstrate that they had taken their concern up a chain of command and request
Written request.
if I remember correctly, 48 hours in advance of the meeting,
Yep.
which felt like a pretty arduous course that we were asking people to take. So we were trying to move off of that course to speaking to the board, but I think it there were gaps left in it, and we didn't get to practice it yet to identify those gaps. I would, to the extent practical, would like public comment to agenda or non-agenda items to be heard during that listening session. And then obviously if we have a public forum on budget cuts or something, there would be a built-in
Line up or
publication piece
something
for that. But in our standard practice, I'd like to see that kind of clarified to be during the listening session.
I would recommend that you choose one and don't have dual systems going, because that's where the confusion is. So whatever it is takes care of all of it at the one. So it's either a listening session in front of work sessions, or it is a public comment or listening session prior to a business meeting.
So
I think it
our
should be-
current policy, sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, I still kind of think that it should be listening and, no comment, just listening. The board can listen or part of the board can listen. And I would like to see it outside of the business meeting before, preferably. I know that there's some thoughts about after, but I'm not interested in that.
Scott?
Yeah, I agree with Dave. After the business meeting makes no sense, because if you are there to talk about something that's on the agenda, then the agenda has already been gone through, votes have been taken, and the point is probably moot at that point. Do we have concerns about if let's say the 7 board members and the superintendent show up at 6 p.m. and we have the listening from 6 to 6:15. We now have a quorum of the board. We have not convened as a board. So are we in violation of an open meeting law at that point? Because we are all in attendance and listening to potentially something that is on the agenda that evening, even if we're not commenting. So that's point number 1. And I wonder, again, the policy that was in place currently, which is 2 board members are supposed to be there 15 minutes before the meeting begins. I wonder if that was put in place with that in mind so that you do not have a quorum of board members. So my other question is, would there be a situation where a person in the community wants to be heard during the actual board meeting? And are we depriving them of that opportunity? And do we need to provide them with that opportunity? And I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just bringing it up as a point of discussion. So beforehand would be my preference. I would like to see it at 5:45 rather than at 6 o'clock, because no matter when you do it, what if nobody shows up? So you sit there for 15 minutes because you can't really begin the other meeting. You can't convene the board meeting until the time that you say you're going to convene the board meeting. And then the other problem comes in, what if you have, as we've seen in other districts recently, way more than 15 minutes of public comment to be made? Now what happens?
So I think that's where we have 15 minutes of public comment. And so we have to make sure that people who comment are keeping, especially if there's a long list of people who have said they're going to comment who show up, we make sure we limit them in time. I think that, policy 206A has that sign up sheet so we can see if people are speaking on the same topic. And then in that case, we do mention that you should try to have a spokesperson rather than each person speaking individually. The policy 206 says that citizens who wish to address the school board on an agenda item may speak during the public comment period. So I think this gets to Lisa's point of we need to be consistent on what we say is public comment period, different than listening session. But I think that in my opinion, and as we were writing it, it was that prior to the meeting where you can have this period where you can comment. Superintendent McDowell can speak to the quorum piece, but we don't officially make the start times for work sessions either, but the meetings are publicly posted. People know that they are open and can attend. We are not meeting without posting it. It will all be online and open to the public to attend this public comment portion. And so from my understanding, and Superintendent McDowell can correct me if I'm wrong, this would not be violating open meeting laws.
That's correct. It's all about posting the meeting. So as long as it's posted that we're meeting 15 minutes prior to the business meeting for the purposes of public comment or listening session or whatever we call it, then you're not in violation.
Right. Okay. Well, that helps. And actually, we can't really comment on anything because we're not convened. So until we convene, we're the same. We're just a community member, just like anybody else.
I would ask that the policy committee, I guess, I don't know, somebody, probably policy committee, goes back and looks at 206 and 206A, because I do think it's not crystal clear, again, around the language of a listening session and public comment, if you're requesting to speak prior to the meeting. I just wanted to clear that if people are requesting to speak and they're putting in their that they understand that it's prior to the official meeting, business meeting starting. It's not when that agenda item comes up. And I think sometimes I think when you read the title of them and it says at school board meeting, that's maybe contributes to that lack of clarity. So just a review and any modifications to make that clear and make sure we're not running, to Superintendent McDowell's point, two practices, where here's how you get to speak at the meeting and here's how you get to speak before the meeting.
I think we just need to simplify it. And as long as everybody's okay with that 15 minutes before a business meeting, then we can simplify the rest of that 206 and get rid of the confusion.
Now, I would like some feedback, especially from people who come to these meetings from work, like Brian, 6 o'clock versus 5:45, as far as the 15 minutes and how that 15-minute shift may affect you with work.
Well, I can tell you that by and large, I'm local, so it really doesn't make a material difference. The only time it makes a material difference is sometime during summer, because summer tends to draw me to some of my faraway branches more often, but generally speaking, it shouldn't be an issue.
Okay. And I know, Scott, you mentioned that you prefer the 5:45 time.
You know what? It really doesn't matter.
Okay.
My mindset is different because I'm still working from my home office. Once I begin working in my faraway office, that will change. Or we
You'll be
get
like,
into the,
why did I say 5:45? Oh, I'm gonna get there.
or we get into the winter months and I'm parked on 494 for 2 hours. Yeah. So 6 p.m. is just fine by me.
Yeah. I think actually now that you say the snow, I'll have a class on Wednesday afternoons. So if I get stuck in snow, which is, it's unlikely, maybe, but you never know. So 6 o'clock may be the best, but I am flexible to do 5:45 as well if anyone has a strong opinion one way or the other. So all right, then we'll go with, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm flipping a coin here. We'll go with 5:45 and then we'll just have consistency with our 6 o'clock start times for the board meeting for convening.
So this will be when we start coming back in person, just to
Correct. When we start
coming back in
person.
person, the intent will be that we, the board members, will be available for listening starting at 5:45 at business meetings.
Correct.
Got it. I will lightly write it down in August, Kelsey, because maybe the stuff will come quick. I'm going to write it down.
You better
I'm
do
an
that in
optimist.
pencil.
I'm going to write that one in pencil. I'm going to write September in pen.
Ooh, that's still bold.
But
I-
I live out there, Kel. I'm just living bold. living
That's
large.
pretty daring.
It's about as much as it gets. That's living on the edge for me. All right, it's written in pen right now.
All right, that sounds good. I'll still be optimistic for August. All right, thank you for the discussion. So we'll move on then, unless there's any more comments on that. Not seeing any, so we will move into the administrative reports, beginning with the superintendent.
All right, I'll make it quick. Some things to update our audience on, and maybe the board. So just a quick calendar item. We're going to be later on in the meeting having an action item to change a little bit of the calendar, and it's just adding that 6th grade will start at the same on the September 8th, the same as 5th grade, just because this past year they didn't start as 5th graders. And so as the middle school team was talking, they thought, you know what, let's stagger start both those grades. That's just going to help making sure all of our kids have a good start in the fall in both 5th and 6th grade for orientation and meeting counselors, their lockers, all that fun stuff. Secondly, our in-person plan is posted to the website. So people that may or may not have been updated on that, as part of receiving ESSER III dollars, the federal dollars from COVID, we needed to post an in-person learning plan for this coming fall, which we've done, and post it for 30 days for public comment. So those 30 days close on July 16th. We already have a couple comments in there, so I know people are looking at it and taking a look, which is great. Summer programming, it's crazy to think, but our preschool summer programming is already going to end here in a week, July 1st. They've been at it for 3 weeks now. It's been going awesome. And then when we come back from July 4th holiday, our elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools will be starting their summer programming. So elementary school will be on starting July 6th, and that'll be held at Pinecrest. And then of course, the middle school and the high school respectively will have their programming starting July 6th as well. A link to that, we have 2 different summer meals options going on. We have a 2 per week meal, and Brittany talked about this at our last board meeting a little bit, but just reminding the community that on Mondays and Wednesdays at a variety of sites, and it'll go out in the Raider update this week again, so all the different locations. But we do have meals going out on Mondays and Wednesdays through the 23rd of August. And then we do have a 5-day meal kit that's available going out at select sites. That's also through the 23rd of August. And again, those will be listed specifically in the Raider update coming out here this week. And then just to let people know, if they've been wondering why they're not getting Raider updates every Sunday, because during the summer, we're doing Raider updates twice, after this board meeting and after the July board meeting. And we're starting the new process of having a school board meeting section in the Raider update. So when we hit the fall and go every week, once a month, there'll be a section that kind of talks to what happened at this board meeting, so that people can have another way to stay informed about what's going on in the district with regard to the board work. And then lastly, just a reminder that the rumors are at this point that we're looking at a potential 2.45% and 2% increase on the formula moving forward. And so we'll see if that pushes through, and hopefully all the other stuff will push through and we won't have a government shutdown, which it looks like we're going well. But I did email all of you, and I've heard back from almost anybody about, or everyone, to do a closed session on our work session on the 14th. So if you haven't responded, please do that so that we can have a closed strategy meeting on finance. With that, I'll take any questions, but that's the update for this month.
So does anyone have any questions?
Hey, Bob, just real quick, just curious, and I don't know what the right answer is, but has, in kind of along the same lines as that 6th grade, kind of missing out a little bit last year, has there been any thought given to how to approach the incoming sophomores who also, they did have some link crew experience, but it certainly wasn't the same, and maybe trying to help them if there's some acclimation missing for some of them, or some of them that chose to go online? Has there been any consideration at the high school level about those folks that were freshmen last year?
I'm not aware of any of that coming out of the high school's planning for the fall. They felt pretty strongly focusing on that incoming freshman class, but I don't know of anything additional for the sophomore class.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions? Okay, well then with that, we will move on to the fundraising report.
And I can take that one. And there were no fundraisers, so that one's really easy on the agenda because it is part of one of our policies.
I opened it up. I thought something was wrong with my document. I'm like, oh, well, nothing and nothing. Okay.
This is another one of those that we're trying to get on a calendar so that no matter what, it goes to that conversation.
Well, thank you for the detailed update. I appreciate it. All right, next is the building construction fund project update.
And that one's pretty simple for this month also. We had one project that moved into design, the high school tennis courts. This was as of May 31st, but there were no other updates.
Great, and I know Lisa will give a summary of the most recent facilities committee meeting later. Scott?
I see that the high school, going back to the construction fund project update, I'm looking in the middle section, which is, let's see. So these are the items that are in design. And I see that the middle school track has 0 project budget. Is that?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Is that telling us something? That, because I know that there were some soil issues there, and I know that the original bid was coming in at what I consider to be a very high number.
So at this point, no budget has been approved for the middle school track. However, in order to do some of that preliminary work to determine what it would take, we have had some costs. Mm-hmm. So at this point, those costs are showing in this fund. We're kind of working to see if we're going to move those to LTFM instead of being in the building construction fund. So they'll probably remain here through June, and then we'll make a decision if we move them or if they stay in bond.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions about the fund project update? Okay, then we're good. Thank you, Jen. We will move into the student enrollment.
So for student enrollment, we had a decrease of about 12 kids as of June 1st, and we did have just a few families that moved out of the district. It wasn't a big change, but that's what the decrease was.
Right, thank you. Any questions for Jen about enrollment? All right, seeing none, we will move into the facilities committee.
Okay, I'm going to focus the update on committee guidance or actions that the committee is recommending. Kind of the detailed background on reports on each of the projects is contained in the minutes. We did hear a report on the 10-year LTFM plan, and the facility committee recommends its approval later on in our agenda. The scope of the high school privacy work in both the FIAD locker rooms and then toilet areas, due to some changes in current construction, both the construction layout and bid pricing, that scope had to be modified. And here again, the facility committee within the approved scope or budget is recommending that 2 toilet areas in the high school be revised to create private toileting areas that has a degree of supervision from staff. So that was a revision in the layout. And then in the FIAD locker room areas, that the existing number of showers and toilets remain, but that those be put into, be modified to a private setting, more private setting. So that's again, the committee's recommendation. We talked about that the whole board would have to have a discussion regarding in-person meeting schedules based on the lag time between ordering and receiving AV equipment for media center modification for use as a boardroom. I will say one of the things that I heard during that report that was really positive is we're working towards having that be where it can be remotely broadcast so that our HCTV staff, we don't have to have numerous staff in attendance, and that hopefully that makes a much easier level of work for them. There was a direction to complete a site investigation of catch basins and drain tiles at the high school baseball field to establish what the necessary scope of work was. There's just still an outstanding question of what the actual resolution on that site is. And it was asked that this assessment be completed in time so that it could be considered at a July facility meeting, which in turn would potentially allow any work to be accomplished yet at the end of this summer, allowing for turf reestablishment prior to the 2022 baseball season. Can't believe I'm saying 2022, but okay. There was an approval to do a fencing fabric replacement at numerous locations at the Hastings Middle School, specifically around the baseball backstop, softball backstops, and fencing around the chillers. We're fortunate to find that the existing poles could be reused. So that was a substantive, savings, or it's just an opportunity to use existing facilities. And then at our last committee meeting, no additional projects were approved to move forward. So that speaks to your question, Scott, about the middle school track. It's still on a potential list. The scope is certainly substantive, and no projects were moved off of the potential list. In general, decisions about any remaining identified but not yet approved projects would need to be made in the late fall timeframe, November, to allow for design and lease and bid letting for construction in 2022-23. And so that's going to be the next work of the committee. There is going to be an updated facilities assessment, updated facilities analysis completed between WOLD and our facility staff. Some inconsistencies in our bond contingency document were cleaned up and clarified, and we may be in a situation, we just may be in a situation where there could be a few more projects accomplished. And so the committee asked that a updated facility analysis be completed and that potential additional projects be brought forward to the committee. So that was kind of a cool meeting. A lot of stuff happened, but again, a key point, no additional projects were approved as of this point. We're looking for more information, both on ALC modifications and additional projects that might have a place within our existing bond. Are there any questions?
Thank you for the summary, Lisa. So I think sometimes it always gets tricky because these summaries come after we've talked about half of them in different items. But anyway, thank you. So the policy committee summary, we met on June 15th. So we went through policy 506, the student discipline policy. And so the policy committee received a draft of the policy that's been completed. It was created by the student discipline working group. We also received a draft of the matrix of disciplinary actions, which we had talked about at the last board meeting, that kind of sets up at this grade level. So it goes by like what the behavioral issue is. And so given this issue, given this age, if it's the first offense, you know, this is what you're looking at for discipline, second offense, this, and it lays it all out very clearly. Now, we didn't bring it forward today because site administrators are going through that line by line to see if any adjustments need to be made based on how they are currently working on discipline. And so we are planning on bringing that forward next month for the board to see as the first read. And we will likely at the next policy committee meeting be discussing the matrix in more detail once we get that feedback from administrators. And so again, we're recommending that that will come forward in July. I will say the policy committee was pretty impressed by the draft that came forward. So we are really excited to be able to share that. And thank you to everyone who has been a part of kind of making that happen, because I know that was a really heavy lift. So thank you. We also talked about policy 430, grad requirements. And again, this one has come up on previous policy committees. And so we continue to check in about it. But we do continue to recommend that this policy isn't reviewed until strategic planning is completed and our new director of teaching and learning has a chance to kind of get adjusted to her new role in the district. It may also be beneficial to wait until after a programmatic review is completed, which we had talked about at our strategic planning work session last week as well. And then policy 503.2, the kindergarten age policy, we had already kind of talked about this today as we moved it forward for the second reading. So for the public, in case you didn't read the add-on, the new policy creates an extended 2-month period after the initial birthday cutoff, and children born during this time are eligible for early admission provided they are developmentally ready, both cognitively, socially, and emotionally. And this would only happen if the board approves the policy. So that's important. So that is not our current policy with this, but if we approve the policy, that would be what changes. And so we just passed that as the first reading this month. We will take it back to policy committee in July and bring it back for our board meeting in July for a second reading. And so that is it for policy committee. Do you have any questions for us? Lisa?
I just have my same old soapbox I like to get on every month, which is I really want that graduation. I would advocate for that graduations requirement policy to come forward sooner rather than later. And sooner rather than later to me does mean strategic plan is done, maybe concurrent with a programmatic review. The tail to implementation is so long that every time I hear it pushed a year, that's really, that's a long time based on graduation requirements that are built off of we're not really sure what. We can't tie it to a public engagement. We can't tie it to a strategic plan development. So just my little advocacy point. Thank you.
Yep. And we continue to look at it. I think this is the 4th month in a row or something like that where it's come up for policy committee. And so it is right at the top of our priority list there to be looking at. We're just waiting for more information to come in before we take that jump. So any other questions for us? All right, seeing none, we can move into the action items. So first up is the consent agenda, and to the community watching, all of the things that are part of the consent agenda can be accessed through Board Book Online. So So do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, oh, Scott?
Just one item that's in there, and that is for our longtime partner, Sterno and Associates. Just wanted to say thank you to them for their continued partnership with our school district. They are a huge part of our mental health initiative for our entire district, our students and our staff. So just a thank you to the organization and to Renee Sterno personally. He's been a great advocate for our students and our staff and for our district as a whole.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
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 Aye. Oppose,
Aye.
same sign. Motion carries. Items for individual action. First is the candidate filing resolution.
All right,
this
so
one-
we are
yep.
in candidate season, right? So we've got something that you've all seen before, I think, is the resolution that has to be established and then sent notice to the public, our newspaper and such. So that's why it's on the agenda this week, so that we can get that out in the appropriate timelines for notification of our public newspapers.
I move the item.
Second.
This one is a resolution, but we do have our, yep,
Stephanie.
but we do have our motion and our second, so that will make it easy for you, Stephanie.
Perfect, yeah, and bear with me for just a second. I am on one screen when normally I have two, so I am pulling it up right now. All right. So, Dave Pendle introduced the following resolution and moved for its adoption. A resolution establishing dates for filing affidavits of candidacy. Be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District Number 200, State of Minnesota as follows. 1, the period for filing affidavits of candidacy for the Office of School Board Member of Independent School District Number 200 shall begin on July 27th, 2021 and shall close on August 10th, 2021. An affidavit of candidacy must be filed in the office of the school district clerk, and the $2 filing fee paid period to 5 p.m. on August 10th, 2021. The clerk is hereby authorized and directed to cause notice of said filing dates to be published in the official newspaper of the district at least 2 weeks prior to the first date to file affidavits of candidacy. Publication of said notice prior to the date of adoption of this resolution is hereby ratified and approved in all respects. The clerk is hereby authorized and directed to cause notice of said filing dates to be posted at the administrative office of the school district at least 10 days prior to the first day of the file affidavits of candidacy. The notice of said filing dates shall be substantially the following form. Notice of filing dates for election to the School Board Independent School District Number 200, Hastings Public Schools, State of Minnesota. Notice is hereby given that the period for filing affidavits of candidacy for the Office of School Board Member of Independent School District Number 200 shall begin on July 27, 2021 and shall close at 5 p.m. on August 10th, 2021. The general election shall be held on Tuesday, November 5th, 2021. At the election, 3 members will be elected to the school board for a term of 4 years each. Affidavits of candidacy are available from the school board, your school district clerk, Independent School District Number 200 at 1011th Street West, Hastings, Minnesota 55033. The filing fee for this office is $2. The candidate for this office Must be an eligible voter, must be 21 years of age or more on assuming office, must have a resident must be a resident of the school district from which the candidate seeks election for 30 days before the general and special election, and must have no other affidavit on file for any other office at the same primary or general election. The affidavit of candidacy must be filed in the office of the school district clerk, and filing fee paid prior to 5:00 p.m. on August 10th, 2021. So the motion of the foregoing resolution was duly seconded by, and I apologize, I didn't catch who seconded it.
Scott.
Scott, all right. Was duly seconded by Scott Gergen. On a roll call vote, the following voted in favor, and I will do a roll call vote right now. So let's start with Dave Pemble,
Yes.
Lisa Hedin,
Yes.
Scott Gergen,
Yes.
Brian Davis,
Yes.
Stephanie Malm, yes. Becky Beisel, was she able to pop on? Okay.
Nope.
And Kelsey Waits.
Yes.
All right, let me pull up my screen again. Whereupon said resolution was declared duly passed and adopted. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. All right. Next up is the calendar adjustment.
All right, so there is one attachment. We put the graphic of our calendar for next year in here, and as I spoke to earlier, it isn't a day change except for on the right-hand side of the calendar where it says dates at a glance. It currently reads September 8th will be the first day grades 1 through 5 and 9. We are recommending that we change September 8th to read first day grades 1 through 6 and 9.
All right.
So moved.
Do we have, there you go. You beat me to it. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Is there any discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up is ISD 200 long-term facility maintenance.
We'll bring Jen Subert back up for that one.
It's actually going to be Cam.
Oh yeah, oh there's Cam. I see him.
He's here.
Sorry, my camera, I had to turn my camera on. So for those who don't know, LTFM is funding from the state that we get to use on health and safety, accessibility, and for maintaining facilities. So if you look at your materials, there's the first three forms are the most important. We have the expenditure and the revenue applications. So if you look at bottom of category 5, that's the budgeted expenditures for the future years. The years are across the top. And then if you look at line 57 on the revenue application, that's the revenue that we'll see in the next 10 years and is projected. It's not exact. So those are the big highlights. But we talked about this at the facility committee meeting that in the future, we'll see a slow decline of revenue as enrollment declines. But we're trying to match our built up in the bank revenue with our projected revenue so that the current budgeted expenditures are a little bit higher than our revenues are, but we have money in the bank right now. So we're working to use up those funds to match the work that needs to happen in our facilities still.
Yeah, and just to support Cam's presentation, we did cover it in some detail in the facilities committee meeting. And again, the facilities committee does support board approval of this plan, 10-year plan.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? Right. Thank you for pulling all this together, Kim, and working really hard on all of the long-term facility maintenance. So great job. All right,
Thanks, Kelsey.
with the motion on the table, all those in favor say aye.
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 Kelsey, was
Opposed, same
Bob trying to
sign?
say something?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. All right, motion carries. All right, 21-22 adopted budget.
Okay, can you see my screen? Yes, okay. So tonight we'll be asking for the adopted budget for 21-22 to be approved. I'll get to kind of the summary page. So the revenue and expenditure changes since the last budget. Our pupil units for 21-22 in the adopted budget is 4,600. This is 48 less students than we had in 2021 for budgeted. And as part of our assumptions meeting, we had used 50% of the transferred out students, non-public and public returning, and then 90% of kindergarten holdbacks also returning. So we'll soon see if that holds true, but then that number will be updated on October 1st, 2021, and we'll do new projections for the future years based on prior year trends. For the revenues, the changes, so in this budget, we had assumed a 1% increase on the Gen Ed formula. So that would put that formula allowance at $6,633. With our declining enrollment, our Gen Ed formula was actually going down by $100,000 roughly. But once we get the final legislative changes, I'll be updating that and doing another budget. The ESSER 1 gear in CRF, all those funds were budgeted for in 2021, so they're coming out of this budget. Our title programs are increasing slightly, about 16,000. We had received the final Solar Garden payment of $40,000 in 2021, so that's also coming out. And then athletic participation fees, we're putting those back to what they had been in the past. So it's an increase of 50,000. That had been a reduction also in 2021 due to COVID. And then our state special ed aid, an increase of 121,000. So the total change to the revenue is a decrease of about 1.3 million, which almost all of that is the ESSER gear in CRF. When we look at the expenditures, the payroll expenditures are increasing about $293,000. And in this budget, we have an estimate in there for the teachers. I have them moving a step and then using an estimate for the 21-22 school year. It includes an estimated savings of 1 resignation or retirement. And the total FTE in this budget is 285.485. The administrators and supervisors are also still an estimate for 21-22. The other expenditures, so the offset to the ESSER 1 gear and CRF funds is there in the exact same amount that you see in the revenue. I added an election budget of $13,600. The property and liability insurance, there's an increase of about $38,000. Our workers' comp insurance is a decrease because that's based on our total salaries. So our total salaries are kind of moving down in total. And then the transportation contract that was just approved had a 4% increase. However, we're anticipating that we're going to be able to reduce a bus in this upcoming year. So as our student enrollment has declined over the last number of years, there hasn't been an adjustment to the number of buses that we're using. So we're looking at doing an transportation audit this upcoming year and really trying to reduce a bus to see some savings there. Our utilities, a reduction of about 88,000. Just overall district-wide budgets, 50,000. Our title programs increasing the same amount relative to that revenue. And then our supply budget's an increase of 30,000. So with the transportation increase, that's carried through to the supply budgets. And then also the cuts that were done for the athletic supply budgets are being added back. They're just not something that they can sustain. The excess safe schools expenditures. So in that revised budget number 2, we had removed some of those costs that we weren't incurring during COVID. They have now been added back in. That's the same thing with OASIS. And then the audit entry for the subsequent year's expenditures that relates back to the 2021 adopted budget. And then just overall other miscellaneous programs, an increase of about $22,000. So the total change to the expenditure budget, a reduction of 384,000. The net change is a reduction of 958,000. So if we look at those fund balances, the actual ending fund balance as of the end of 1920 was 14,195,000. Our projected ending fund balance for 2021 is 14,508,000 after the revised number 2 budget. And then after this budget for 21-22, we would be looking at 13,682,000. A revised budget will be done to account for, staffing due to the student numbers, contract settlements for teachers, administrators, and supervisors, the actual higher costs versus the estimates used for salaries and the open positions, the legislative changes to revenue and expense regulations, adjustments based on the audit for 2021, and then the addition of the ESSER 2 and 3 revenues and expenditures. So right now we're just in the process of reviewing public and staff feedback on those. And then as far as the legislative changes, Dr. McDowell kind of already mentioned it, but year 1, it's sounding like it's a 2.45% increase, year 2, a 2% increase, and then there should also be additional funds for the special ed cross subsidy, as well as the English learner cross subsidy. So this next page, we'll just kind of recap what we've already seen, but the top section are all the restricted accounts. So those are funds that have already an identified purpose. This middle section here are committed accounts. And then the bottom section is, all the unassigned. So here's where you can see this yellow line is kind of the main one that we look at. This budget for unassigned is overspending by 646,000, and it'll show that ending fund balance of 13.8 million. I can stop there and take any questions you have on Fund 1, if anybody has anything.
And I can't see your hand, so if you do have something, please just jump in.
I'm going to foreshadow you a little bit, Jen, and thank you for recapping the assumptions. That's something I struggle to hang on to in my mind from one meeting to the next. But I know we're going to see that we've talked about that community ed had a challenging year and is not going into 21-22 in a strong financial position. None of the assumptions or anything shown on this page yet addresses that issue, even though we've talked about as a board that it will likely be necessary to fund some of the community ed work out of our general fund. So even as we see that unassigned go down, we are likely to see it go down more.
Sure, and that's a good lead in just into this next page. So for Fund 2 for food service, the 21-22 school year will be a little different. We'll be operating under the seamless summer option versus our regular program. that will allow some additional flexibility, but it also provides a higher summer food service reimbursement rate. And that's meant to kind of recognize the additional costs of serving meals during the pandemic. However, meals will continue to be free for the whole year for 21-22 for students. So we really budgeted in Fund 2 conservatively, but the ending fund balance there still looks good. So then community service, that one, it does look much different. We have talked about the need to do a transfer from the general fund based on the 2021 activity. Community ed just really wasn't able to operate as they normally would. And then also, you know, had some pretty hard requirements that they had to meet as far as staffing ratios and offering emergency childcare and things like that. So we'll continue to evaluate community ed throughout the 21-22 school year and make the necessary adjustments. But I do anticipate that once the 2021 final expenditures are processed, that we will be bringing to the board a recommendation to do a fund balance transfer. And then Fund 6 is on here, building construction. We'll be getting, you know, hopefully down to kind of the final funds at the end of the 21-22 school year. And then the other funds are also shown. The packet actually contains a lot of additional information that I won't go through very detailed. But if we do look at just revenues, really high level, state aids amount for about 76% of our revenues, and then property taxes being the second largest category and about 16%. Our expenditures by object, so for the general fund, are between the salaries and wages and the employee benefits. It's about 83% of the district's budget is between categories. And then these next pages will show it for the additional funds. And then it just continues on, and there'll be a staffing summary. You can see we're going down by about 17.3 FTE, and that's between the cuts and the 1-year positions that we had due to COVID this year. And I think there's still a lot more detail. If anybody's interested, it'll show a lot of the capital expenditures and then go into the detail on each one of those, the capital and the LTFM, staff development, and our property tax levy. So I'm willing to take any questions if you have them.
All right. Anyone have any questions? All right. I'm not seeing any pop up. So thank you for going through this with us and for all of your work. It's a lot here. So if the community would like to see the whole packet, it's about 21 pages long. So, and it is accessible online. So do we have a motion to approve the 21-22 adopted budget?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So now our policies that we had looked at earlier are popping back up. So first up is policy 406, the public and private personnel data. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving policy 406, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up, policy 430, employee recognition compensation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So last up on the agenda is our list of future meetings. So on July 6th, we have a policy committee meeting that will be taking place on Zoom. So now we're going to start seeing Zoom or in person as we mix this up. The board work session is on July 14th in the district office, and July 28th is the regular board meeting, which will be on Zoom. So is there anything else that we need to cover tonight? Otherwise, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All right, all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, so the meeting is adjourned.